The owners hide behind football operations, but the owners always have a spoon in the stew, and it's always the most influential spoon.
4 snaps. That's how long Aaron Rodgers lasted before his Achilles tore. The Jets season was over before it even started.
Oh, he's down. He's down.
Oh.
It's his ankle.
Sam Darnold needed 6 years and 4 different teams to recover from what the Jets did to him. Zach Wilson was drafted 2nd overall and looked destroyed by his 3rd season.
The Jets, in all my years of studying drafts, I've never heard a team lock in on a player from day one. It's like we're 2 months out, and I'm reading reports. The Jets are locked in on Zach. You're locked in?
And he knew that too.
Yeah.
Christian Hackenberg never even played it down. Le'Veon Bell was one of the best running backs in the league.
He was a bust for the Jets.
Yeah.
And he's been a bust for the league. Because I'm going to remind you, they tried to trade him a year ago at the trade deadline. No takers.
Right.
They obviously desperately shopped him this time.
Right.
No takers.
With him, he's guaranteed $6 million on next year's salary.
Mexico Burris caught a game-winning touchdown for the other team in New York. Then they come to the Jets, and they're never the same. That pattern isn't a coincidence. The Jets are a career destroyer, and it's worse than you might even think. There's a formula for building a winning NFL franchise, and the weird part is teams have been doing it for decades without ever saying that it's an actual system. The first ingredient is an owner who writes the checks and then gets out the way, and that's harder than it sounds because most owners want to be involved even when they shouldn't be. The second is a general manager with a real philosophy who gets to build a roster over multiple drafts without looking over their shoulder every time someone questions the plan. The third is coaching stability, and what that really means is a head coach who survives past year 3 so that the system can actually take root and players know what they're getting. The fourth is a culture of winning, which is one of those vague phrases that doesn't really mean anything until you see a place that doesn't have it. And then you understand exactly what it means. And having a franchise quarterback definitely doesn't hurt. The teams that have this don't always win the Super Bowl, and that's something that a lot of people don't actually take into account. The Patriots had it for 2 decades and won 6 rings, but even when they weren't winning, they were never scary in the wrong direction. The Chiefs have had it since Andy Reid arrived and Patrick Mahomes fell into their laps. And even in the years they don't win at all, you never question what they're doing. The Ravens have had it since the 90s with different coaches and different quarterbacks and different approaches, but the identity has pretty much stayed the same. The Seahawks built it with Pete Carroll and have remained competitive through multiple roster makeovers, ultimately winning it all again last season. Now here's the thing. Name the one franchise who has had none of those things going on for 30 years. Not one. The owner who gets involved, the general manager doesn't get enough time to build, the coaching carousel that never stops, the culture that never develops, the parade of quarterbacks who come in broken and leave even worse. The Jets aren't a team that just has bad luck. This is a team that breaks people, and it starts at the top. Woody Johnson bought the team in 2000, and that's over a quarter century now. So we've seen a whole generation of players, coaches, and GMs come and go without ever building anything that really lasts. In that time, the Jets have had exactly 2 playoff runs that actually mattered, back in 2009 and 2010, when Rex Ryan's defense dragged the team with Mark Sanchez at quarterback to back-to-back AFC Championship games. And that was a high watermark for the entire Woody Johnson era. Since then, it's been 0 playoff appearances and 15 seasons of irrelevance dressed up as hope every single August. But the problem is not just the results, and that is the part that makes the ownership so damaging. The problem is how Woody operates because the owner who stays out of the way is the one who hires the right people and lets them work. You see this in Kansas City with the Hunt family, but Woody doesn't do that. He gets involved in ways that undermine the people he hired, and this has been documented across multiple coaches and general managers over the years. During the 2024 season, Woody was reportedly talking about how good a player was and potentially how much playing time they should get because of their Madden rating. We all know this isn't how winning teams actually operate, because once the owner breaks the actual structure, there's nobody there to fix it. The wall between ownership and the locker room that every winning franchise protects like a sacred boundary is the wall that Woody Johnson bulldozed years ago and never bothered to rebuild. He would constantly be one of the worst ranked owners during the report card season, being a major reason that they were banned. When you have an owner who hires based on personal relationships rather than football acumen, you have already lost before the season starts because you're not building a roster, you're building a buddy system. And buddy systems don't survive contact with actual competition. The owner problem leads directly into the front office problem because the owner is now firing the general managers, and that leads to a lot of good GMs, potentially great ones, not wanting to be there. Since 2000, the Jets have had 7 different general managers. Mike Tannenbaum came in first and built teams that were aggressive and tried to win now by trading picks for veterans. John Idzik came in and stockpiled cap space and did nothing with it, which is his own kind of failure. Mike McCagnon drafted Jamal Adams, who was one of the best safeties in football, but by the time Adams was in his prime, McCagnon was gone. Joe Douglas then was in charge, and Douglas didn't want to pay a safety. So Adams got traded, and the Jets took a first-round pick for a player they had already developed into a star and handed that star to another team. Now their newest general manager, Darren Moogie, decided to get rid of some of their best players just last year in Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. That's the Jets cycle in 4 words: draft, develop, trade, repeat. Every new general manager comes in with a different philosophy because every new GM knows they have a short leash. And a general manager with a short leash makes short-sighted decisions because they mortgage the future to save their job in the present. And this is why the rebuild never ends. You can't build anything when the person building it gets fired before their players even have time to develop. Which brings us to the coaching carousel. It gets really ugly in a way that is kind of surprising unless you've been watching for like the past 20 years. Since 2000, the Jets have had 9 different head coaches, and that's a new coach every 2 to 3 years on average, which means no coaches had enough time to build anything that lasted beyond their first couple of drafts. Herm Edwards came in and was fired. Eric Mangini came in next and was fired. Rex Ryan came in and was actually good for a while, but was even only there for 5 seasons before they moved on. Todd Bowles got 4 seasons. Adam Gase got 2. Robert Saleh got 3. Jeff Olberg got 1. Aaron Glenn is the current guy, and if history is any guide, he probably only has 1 more year before someone decides that he's the problem and not the situation he inherited. Though I do think he should probably honestly be gone. The problem is that not all of these are bad coaches, although some of them definitely are. The problem isn't even that the Jets have bad luck during the hiring process. The problem is that every new coach brings in a new system, and a new system means new terminology on both sides of the ball, new playbook install, new culture, new way of doing things. Every time that happens, the roster turns over because players who fit the old system get replaced by players who fit the new system, and draft picks get burned on scheme-specific players who get fired along with their coach. This creates a permanent rebuild that is always starting over before it even finishes, and the fans get conditioned to hope every time a new coach arrives and then get disappointed when the same pattern shows up 2 years later. And the hiring process itself is broken because when you look at the hires Woody Johnson has made, there's a clear pattern of prioritizing flashy names over actual readiness. When you hire coaches without a real plan for how to develop players and support them, you get 3 years of bad football, a fired coach, and another reset that the fans are supposed to somehow get excited about. Now we get to the real story, and the real story is a graveyard, because the bad owner, the bad front office, the coaching carousel all leads to one thing. Players come here to die, and not just any players, Pro Bowlers, Super Bowl champs, first round picks, guys who were great somewhere else and came to the Jets and immediately fell apart, or started with the Jets and flourished somewhere else. Let's start with the quarterbacks because that's where the highest body count is, and with Sam Darnold because his story is the one that should make every Jets fan furious. Sam was a 3rd overall pick in 2018, and by every measurable standard, he had the tools to be a franchise quarterback. Big arm, good mobility, decent processing speed for a kid that age, and the Jets had a chance to build something around him with a coach who could develop talent and an offense that could grow with him. Instead, though, they hired Adam Gase, who was a disaster from day one. His offense was predictable, along with his relationship with players being even worse. And Darnold spent 2 years in that system learning all the wrong lessons about how to read defenses and process information and move in the pocket. By the end of his time with the Jets, Sam looked like he had never played quarterback before. He was seeing ghosts in the pocket. He got traded to Carolina and was bad there too. Then he went to San Francisco as a backup, where he was not great but better. Then he went to Minnesota, and in 2024 he threw for over 4,000 yards and led the Vikings to 14 wins, looking like a legit starting quarterback who had figured out how to play the position the right way. Capping it off last season with the Super Bowl win with the Seattle Seahawks. The Jets had the 3rd overall pick in that draft. They took a quarterback with elite talent. They put him in a situation so bad that he needed 6 years and 4 different teams to recover. Zach Wilson came next. He was a 2nd overall pick in 2021, and the arm talent was real. Everyone who watched him in college could see it, and the Jets saw enough to take him. But the Jets gave him nothing to support him. No offensive line worth mentioning, no running game to take pressure off the pass, a receiving core that was always injured and never gave him reliable targets, and a coaching staff that didn't know how to develop a quarterback because Robert Saleh was a defensive guy and the offensive coordinator, whoever they hired, couldn't fix what was broken around Wilson. By his 3rd season, he looked broken in a different way than what Darnold had. Darnold looked like a guy who had been miscoached. Zach looked like a guy who had lost confidence entirely and didn't trust what he was seeing anymore. He was holding onto the ball too long because he was waiting for something to open up that never did. He was seeing pressure that wasn't there and bailing out of clean pockets. Wilson went on to play for the Dolphins, Broncos, and now the Saints. If he ever figures it out, and that's a big if, it won't be because the Jets helped him get there. It will be despite what the Jets did to him. Then there's Christian Hackenberg, who's the most underrated example of how the Jets wasted people. Hackenberg was a second-round pick in 2016, which means the Jets used a valuable pick on a quarterback they had no plan to develop. He was raw coming out of Penn State, and I mean raw. The kind of quarterback who needs a redshirt year and a lot of coaching before he's ready to play. And the Jets gave him absolutely nothing. He spent 2 years on the roster. 2 years in that building, learning nothing and developing bad habits, and watching from the bench while the team cycled through worse and worse options at QB. He never played a single snap in a regular season game. He was traded to the Raiders and then cut. That's not a bust. A bust is when you draft a guy and he doesn't have what it takes, but at least he plays. But Hackenberg is different. He's a catastrophe that ruined so many careers. But somehow those aren't the only Jets QBs that they've ruined. Brett Favre came to the Jets in 2008, and he was a future Hall of Famer, arguably the greatest quarterback of his generation, and the guy had been playing at an MVP level for years before he ever put on the green and white. What the Jets did with Favre was waste one good year. He threw 22 touchdowns and 22 interceptions, got injured during the season, and the Jets missed the playoffs. He was gone after that year. Then he went to Minnesota and threw 33 touchdowns, which was one of the best seasons of his career, and the Vikings went to the NFC Championship game. Brett was old, and nobody's saying that the Jets destroyed his legacy, but the pattern is instructive. He came to New York, left, and immediately played better somewhere else. Aaron Rodgers is the one that stings the most because he had so much hype coming from the Packers. Aaron was 39 years old when the Jets traded for him, and he was still playing at a high level. The Jets made the kind of splashy move that gets fans excited about because it finally felt like the franchise was going to get its quarterback. 4 MVPs, a Super Bowl, a first ballot Hall of Famer when he decides to retire. The Jets traded for him, paid him, and built the whole offseason around him. And 4 snaps into his first game as a Jet, Rodgers tore his Achilles, and the season was over before it started. And then the strange part is that Rodgers came back in 2024 and played all 17 games. He was clearly not the same player who could extend plays and make off-platform throws and read defenses at a high level, but he was definitely functionable. 3,900 yards and 28 touchdowns against 11 interceptions is a respectable line for any quarterback, let alone a 41-year-old coming off an Achilles injury. And yet the Jets still couldn't win. They went 5-12. Aaron looked frustrated and isolated and old in a way that was really hard to watch. The Jets then went on a youth movement last year, so they picked up Justin Fields on a crazy deal for absolutely no reason. He would finish a game with negative passing yards as a starting quarterback. That's really all you need to know about that season. Now the Jets want to tread back with Geno Smith off his worst year in close to half a decade. So we'll see how this goes. But if history stands true, it probably won't be great. Unfortunately, QBs aren't the only skill position that the Jets kill. But before we get into those other players, I'd appreciate it if you all subscribed if you like this video. It lets YouTube and myself know that you all are enjoying this content and want to see more. But before we get back to the show, we have a quick word from our sponsor over at PrizePicks. The football preseason is officially here, and there's no better place to run your game than PrizePicks, America's #1 sports pick app. We've got star players on new teams and an incredible rookie class ready to take over as we get ready for the biggest football season yet. What I love about PrizePicks is that you don't have to just stick to week action. You can lock in full season picks right now on player projections. I already put together a 3-pick lineup that I'm locked into for the year. Currently, I got Dak Prescott at more than 4,024.5 passing yards, Bijan Robinson at more than 1,149.5 rush yards, and Caleb Williams at more than 3,599.5 passing yards. Building your lineup is super easy. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, submit your lineup, and follow your progress all year long right inside the app. Plus, PrizePicks is available in all 50 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $150 instantly in lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. Again, that's download the app today and use code CLNS to get $150 instantly in lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. And I'm going to say that actually one more time. That's $150 instantly in lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, America's #1 sports pick app. Now let's get back into it. Jets ruin everyone. And the skill players that have come through New York are a living testament that the Jets can actually destroy anybody they want. Le'Veon Bell was arguably the best running back in football with Pittsburgh, a complete weapon who could run, catch, and pass protect in a way that only truly elite backs can do. And when he sat out the whole season in a contract dispute and then signed with the Jets in 2019, a lot of people thought it was a perfect fit. The Jets gave him a 4-year deal worth a significant amount of money, and then they used him completely wrong. They ran him between the tackles behind a bad offensive line instead of getting him the ball in space where he can make people miss. They didn't use him in the passing game the way that Pittsburgh had, which was Bell's specialty and the thing that made him unguardable. They asked him to do things that didn't fit his skill set at all, and Le'Veon went from being a top 3 back in the league to looking like a completely replacement level player in one season. He was cut after a year and a half and never looked the same after that. Chris Johnson was one of the most explosive running backs in NFL history, and I mean that literally because he had a 2,000-yard season in Tennessee. While he was electric every time he touched the ball. 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons with the Tennessee Titans, including that monster year, and the Jets signed him in 2014. Immediately, that 6 1,000-yard season streak stopped. Chris averaged 4.3 yards per carry with the Jets, which is not bad, but the Jets' offense was so bad that Johnson looked invisible even when he was running well. The line was bad, the quarterback play was even worse. There was nothing ever happening around him that made the running game matter or easier, and Chris was out of the league just a few years later. The tread was still on the tires, as they say, but the Jets didn't use him right. Demaryius Thomas won a Super Bowl with Denver. He was a 4-time Pro Bowler. He had 5,000 yards in a 3-year stretch with the Broncos, and he was one of the most reliable pass catchers in the league at his peak. 2019, at age 31, he signed with the Jets, and this should have been a situation where a veteran receiver helps a young quarterback develop while he was being a reliable target in the passing game. He only played 10 games. That was it for his career. 400 yards on a bad Jets team and never played another snap. R.I.P. Percy Harvin was one of the most dynamic playmakers in the league with Minnesota and Seattle. He won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks. He was a guy who could score from anywhere on the field, a return specialist who changed games in the kicking game, a receiver who could line up anywhere and create mismatches. The Jets traded for him in 2014 and thought they were getting a weapon who could elevate the entire offense. Percy only played 8 games. He caught 29 passes and he was gone the next season. Jets didn't use him right. They just plugged him in and expected to get results, but they got nothing. Plaxico Burress was a Super Bowl hero for the Giants. He caught the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl against the Pats the first time. He missed 2 seasons in prison after accidentally shooting himself in a nightclub, came back and signed with the Jets in 2011 at age 34. At that point in time, he wasn't the same player he had been, so he was probably just going to be a number 2 in the right situation. The Jets asked him to be a number 1 when he clearly wasn't anymore, and the offense was such a mess that Burress caught 8 touchdowns, but the whole thing was chaotic, and he never played another season in the NFL after the following one. Mike Vick was one of the most athletic quarterbacks to ever play the game. He had revived his career in Philadelphia and was playing functional football again. The Jets signed him in 2014 as a backup to Geno Smith, which should have been a perfect situation because Vick could have mentored Smith and provided insurance if Smith struggled. The offense was so bad, though, that they had to put in Michael Vick, and he couldn't do anything. He threw a couple touchdown passes and a couple of interceptions, and that was pretty much it as a career as a relevant quarterback. Jets turned him into a trivia answer instead of a resource. I could keep going on because the list is that long. Brandon Marshall was an all-pro with the Bears and still talks about how the organization didn't support him the right way. Santonio Holmes was a Super Bowl hero with the Steelers and never replicated that kind of success with the Jets. Ed Reed's career ended when he went to the Jets. Art Monk, Matt Forte, Jason Taylor, Steve Atwater, Josh Cribbs, Antonio Cromartie, and Darrelle Revis the second time around. The pattern holds no matter who you look at. On paper, they should be great. They're an NFL franchise in one of the biggest markets in the country. They have a loyal fan base and deep pockets. They have the money to hire anyone. They have the market to attract free agents, have draft capital built through the draft, have everything they need to be a successful franchise except for the one thing that matters, which is a functional structure underneath all of the surface appearance. The owner meddles, the front office turns over, the coaches get fired, the quarterbacks get broken, the players who escape are the lucky ones, and they get to tell the story of how they survived the Jets instead of being buried by them. Until those things change, it'll just continue to be more the same. So there you have it. Watch this next video if you haven't already and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching.